I was literally juggling my day job while my film was playing many blocks south of me in Manhattan. And I was telling my coworkers, yeah, my movie's playing down the street. They're like, what?
Thank you so much for joining us because
Sure.
there's a lot I want to touch base with. And I think among a lot of conversations I had with other creators, you really have, there's something really unique about how you target, stories and how you shape them and put that truth up front, right?
Mhm.
So, what exactly is with you that like drives you to do that in your life?
Sure. To begin with, I mean, I spent a long time in New York City trying to survive as a fine artist, but also working in advertising. I was working for some of the biggest ad agencies in America on Madison Avenue. And I looked at my life and just said, I cannot do this for the rest of my life. It was very unsatisfying from a emotional, psychological, and just I just couldn't imagine doing this for the rest of my life. And I lived through 9/11 in New York City. I lived there during the time. And it was that point in my life where I just became more sort of aware of the world in which we live. I guess is the easiest way to describe it, instead of being so when you're young and sort of selfish and self-centered in your own life. And so I always knew, I thought, wow, I would love to do my own documentary about a very important subject, but I didn't really know what that would be. And so I would always read nonfiction books on the long train rides home. Long story short, I picked up a book called The Cancer Industry, a very old book from the late 1970s. It was redone in the 80s, and it told the story of my third documentary, Second Opinion, Laetrile Sloan Kettering. And I tried to make that movie. I tried to contact the author and say, look, I want to turn this into a movie, but I had no credentials of any sort. And understandably, this was an accomplished writer, whistleblower guy, that wrote the book. So I set my sights on something similar in the world of the cancer industry, if you would. And this guy, Brzezinski, which was the first movie that I did. And there's a Polish American who lives in Houston who had apparently gone up against the American federal government on multiple occasions and beat the American government for his right to continue using this patented cancer therapy that pharma didn't own. It's a unique chemical. It's not some natural therapy. So he literally was a competitor to the industry, and still is in many ways. So I just did a movie about that. I didn't know really what I was getting into, other than knowing that it was a really interesting story and I thought it would be important. And also, to be perfectly honest, I think people forget, and I also forget, I was really the first filmmaker to do a story like this, where you dove into sort of the corruption within the establishment of medicine, even is rooted in the FDA, the regulatory authority in America, and also to kind of talk about these under the radar alternative medical treatments that was actually successful. Like some people have tried, but no one had heard about this stuff. And frankly, a lot of the people that were aware of me doing the movie at the time just looked at me like I was crazy. Like, no one's going to pay attention to this, Eric. You're not going to get anywhere with this, Eric. And I finished it. And to my absolute surprise, like, I got it reviewed by the New York Times and Variety, the LA Times. I had it in small theaters in Manhattan and New York, because that's what you kind of have to do if you want to get reviewed. And then next thing I knew, I got it on Netflix before Netflix became humongous. I got it on Netflix in 2011. And then it ended up on American television, the documentary channel, which was around back then. It was an American national television network called the Documentary Channel. I won the top audience award for that year. And these things just kept happening. And then in Warsaw, there's this big film festival in Warsaw where I won the two top awards for the nation and the city. So I flew to Warsaw, and it was like an EU sponsored, but all these EU diplomats were there. It was totally surreal and weird. And frankly, yeah, but yeah. So I was like one of the first ones. I kind of like unintentionally paved the way for all of these sort of controversial medical documentaries, if you would. So it's kind of interesting to look back on that. That's sort of like, that was my motivation. I was literally juggling my day job while my film was playing many
Can
blocks
believe
south
that.
of me in Manhattan. And I was telling my coworkers, yeah, my movie's playing down the street. They're like, what? What? It was really weird. But the movie became successful enough because back then people bought DVDs. And when you are like me and you do a big run of DVDs, wholesale is really tiny compared to people paying 10, 15, $20 a DVD. And if you sell enough of them, so I did really well. I was able to quit my job, and I funded the sequel to that movie and my third movie. before I ran out of money at the end of that because nobody bought DVDs anymore. We can get into that as well because that's partly why we're here because of streaming. Because streaming killed the DVD, which is how innovation works, right? So yeah, that's sort of like the how I got into it. I really didn't set a roadmap. I just knew I didn't want to do what I was doing for a living, and I enjoyed making this film. And I love the idea of being a documentary filmmaker, when you take on your own subjects, you're not working for anybody. It's your choice. As long as you can get the funding for it, you don't have to answer to anybody, to do that.
So Eric, was that a side project in like when you started the documentary? Because you said like I had a day job, right? And like meanwhile, like how like it is very impressive to think like your voice became so loud throughout that work, and meanwhile actually you had a day job. By the way, what was that day job like? I'm very curious now.
Yeah, I mean, I started out as like a big time like creative in Madison Avenue, like the show Mad Men. Like I was one of the creatives, and I quickly realized that I didn't like it. And so what I did is I was very good at post production work, and I also was getting more experience in the world of television because I knew I was going to do something in film of some kind. Because of course, documentary being the easiest. To answer your question, I was doing a more lower level but high paid work on TV commercials, like something so stupid as like J.C. Penney sale for Father's Day and like 50% off flies across the screen, and you got paid stupid amounts of money for doing something that was so easy, and I didn't care because I just needed to make good money, and I had no intention of forwarding my career in advertising. I would just take, again, the highest paying job with the least amount of responsibility, which was at the time easy to acquire if you had the right skill set. So, but to answer your question, so I would literally, once I gained the trust of the subject, the actual subject of the movie, this guy Brzezinski, I would honestly call in sick to work. I would go on weekends and use credit card debt to fly around and interview people. And my wife, frankly, thought I was crazy, but she also knew that I was so unhappy with my career path that she was just going to stand out of my way and just not be in my way. And anyway, so that's the best I can tell you. Like I literally had no idea what the end result would be. And YouTube had just kind of been around only for a few years. I was completely ready to just throw it up on YouTube as my contribution to whatever and just let the world see it. I had no intention of making money from it. Of course, that would be ideal. And I did work hard to make sure I could maybe do that. But I had no lofty expectations at all. Yeah.
So a lot has changed since then because it seems you're talking about the early days when the internet was picking up and the social media and the tools, were starting being used by people that had something to say, and there wasn't much of a quality content. But, with everything like right now it's happening that a lot of those voices are being shut down and there is a very high preference for particular subjects. You shed light on issues that many might shy away from, right? And
Yeah.
and that takes quite of I would say you must be very brave because you're upsetting people, right? Like they're like, and mostly we're talking here about, as you said, like big guys in the industry that like had the last word on what's there. How you navigate that? As what do you think it has to be your character composed of to not get yourself down? Or
Well, to answer that question, like my first movie, because I was one of the first ones to ever do this and actually let it become successful. Like I even met with NBC at 30 Rock. Like I met with everybody. Like everybody wanted to, and some of the meetings I had were like, we just wanted to meet you, Eric, to make sure you weren't crazy. Like, because they watched the movie, and they're like, this is the craziest story ever. Like, there's got to be something wrong. Like, this can't be true. Like, you know what I mean? So anyway, to answer your question, when my first movie, I think the opposition, if you would, was unprepared. They weren't prepared for something like Eric releasing this movie, Brzezinski, having it on Netflix, national TV, winning awards on Dr. Oz. Like I was on like every big podcast except for like maybe Joe Rogan at the time, and they were unprepared. So to answer your question, I mean, you just have to have thick skin because once the opposition started building and building, and you realized that they're literally, I mean, a lot of us saw what happened during COVID, and I don't want to get into a big COVID discussion, but I think a lot of the average people saw how crazy it can be when you have something like COVID come along and all this misinformation from both sides, by the way. It's not just from the government only. Both sides were throwing around. But at the time when Brzezinski exploded, I wasn't messed with for a long time. And it wasn't until I was working on the sequel, and I guess they found out I was doing that, that it really heat up. Where the point where, anyway, I don't know how to answer your question other than you have to have thick skin. I mean, you just can't let it bother you. It's kind of like when you hear people say, like famous people, like a Joe Rogan or a celebrity says, I don't read the comments about myself. I don't have time for that. It's just going to, put me in a bad mood. You kind of have to have that attitude. You just have to like keep forging ahead and not be distracted by all this noise coming at you. And if you know you're right and you know you have confidence in the story and you've done your due diligence and you've done your fact checking and you know it's controversial and you know it's going to freak some people out that hear about this. But, yeah, that's the best I can tell you. Interestingly enough, like the Andorra hustle was more insane than any of the medical ones in a way, because you had the Spanish government and the Andorran government, like they had my movie taken down off of Amazon Prime within 48 hours of it being up. They had
That's where I want to get.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
wanted to point that out. Like in 48 hours, this guy's like, no, like it can't be seen. That is. I just wanted to highlight it and stop you because like we need that story. Like,
well, I'll give you one better. I was prepared for this because I've been doing these movies long enough, and everybody in Andorra on the ground and in Barcelona. You live in Barcelona, so I mean, that's a pretty intense government in Spain. If they don't want somebody talking, they will make sure of that. Anyway, but I was prepared, so I had it already uploaded to YouTube as private, waiting for that moment that they were going to take it off of Amazon. So boom. And I just took advantage of it. And at the time we had publicists working in Barcelona, publicists working in America, while they were on my retainer, if you would, at the time. So as soon as Amazon yanked, and it was clear it was censorship, there's no way around it, the publicists ran with it. And it was just all over social media. Oh, see the movie that they don't want you to see, got yanked from Amazon. Here's the YouTube link. So it got like 500,000 views in about a week, and it got yanked off of YouTube. So, and then what do? So it's just a game of whack-a-mole. And the same thing happened with Brzezinski. I mean, even all these years later, just January of 2023, I'll get into this later in the conversation on how I distribute now, but YouTube monetization, where you find an aggregator and they take your content and they pitch it to all these big YouTube channels that have like 4 million subscribers, 10 million subscribers. And these channels survive by just uploading new content every day, and they take a piece of the monetization, right? So Brzezinski, something that was released in 2010 originally, in January 2023, it showed up on a new YouTube channel. It got 5 million views in 3 weeks, got yanked. And it was incredible. And so and then you just put it back up again, and it never quite gets the same steam. So movies like mine, it's like a game of whack-a-mole, because you want it on YouTube because that's what people use all the time. But anyway, I'll let you
absolutely. Like this is the times we live, and you've done the work. You've been acclaimed for it, right? And all of a sudden we live these times that apparently like it's not appropriate, right? Like the audience should not know. And I feel like it's going very much against all the principles that America has around, like free speech and all this and that. How do you think like people that are like on the ground working on films like the way you did, like have a future in this world of media that is like so, constrained and like you never seem to, like, you have to be so politically correct and you don't even know what that looks like or means. And I think truths like are fading apart. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, in many respects, like I was luckily kind of born into like a generation, if you would, even though in my early 50s, but like born into the time in media where I was able to take advantage of the technology at the time. And I wasn't even really aware of what I was involved in, because social media or YouTube was so much smaller. Netflix was smaller, but it still had all of those things had wide reaches. But nowadays, I mean, for someone who wanted to like do exactly what I'm doing, there's really only one way, unfortunately, there's two ways. One, you use your own money and go into debt and hope you make it back, which really isn't the case really anymore, because you don't have that many commercial outlets to choose from anymore, and no one buys DVDs, so that's out. But the way I do it today is I've kind of collected a core group of wealthy people, mostly all in the United States now, that believe in what I'm doing. And so if I come up with a new idea, I'll say, look, this is how I really want to do this story, and I'll explain it. And usually they'll get either A, they won't understand it, and they want to understand it, or B, they're familiar with it, like, yes, you have to do this story. And then I'll say, look, I need X amount of money a month to survive. This is probably how much I'm going to have to spend on travel. This is how much this is, it's like, what do you think? It's like, and I, of course, and they're completely aware that they're not going to make any of this money back at all, just no, at all. And I work with what's called in America, a 501c3 nonprofit. So I can legally, on the books with the IRS, the American tax authorities, allow these wealthy people to give donations to this entity, and then the entity gives me the money, and everything's reported to the government. So that is where our free speech is still there. But to answer your question, I mean, if you take on a subject like mine, my first movie was about a physician and doctor who created a patented chemical that was a gentler, more effective treatment for cancer, and that threatens a multi-trillion-dollar industry worldwide. You're talking about scores of people losing their jobs. You're talking about a domino effect beyond belief. And I know how depressing that sounds, but I say it so a matter of fact. Like, oh my gosh, people think, oh, a cure for cancer is going to be worth a fortune. Absolutely not. It would be devastating. It'd be great for humanity, but devastating for the industry we live. And so my third movie, also about a similar situation, except this was a natural substance covered up in the 1970s by the American government, by the largest cancer institution in America in New York City called Sloan Kettering. And they also, similar to the Andorra Hustle, they hated me. I mean, they had my YouTube channel erased from existence. I mean, it was intense. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm getting on a tangent here. To answer your question,
I think
it's not easy.
you're getting on the right tangent, Eric, because this is exactly, I think, highlighting the bravery of, I still have a voice, and I'll use all the means, and there's not right and wrong. There are just many more options. And
I'll say one more thing on this, because I think that goes to your question. I've learned so much. I started out kind of naive and bright-eyed and wanting to make a difference. And I think in many respects I did with most of my movies. The Andorra Hustle certainly made a little bit of a difference, in that the mainstream media was forced to change their narrative about this story. That was huge for me to witness that. Even though none of them gave me credit, I didn't really care about the credit, but to watch the domino effect of everybody having to rewrite the narrative because my movie was so airtight. First of all, we have hidden recordings of the Spanish secret police threatening this bank. You can't argue with what happened. Everything in this, anyway, you have to see the movie anyway. But today, just to fast forward, my latest, talk about courage, my latest documentary I just released that I worked on while working on the Andorra Hustle takes place following these Ukrainian scientists. And it's involved something called fetal stem cell therapy. And this is the most controversial thing you could ever imagine. So we have 50 million abortions annually every year in the world. Whether we agree or disagree with abortion is not my business. But the point is that this group of scientists for 30 years, ever since Chernobyl, were allowed to do this because they were curing bone marrow failure, radiation-induced bone marrow failure after Chernobyl, and they were given the green light. And nobody's heard of these people, even to this day. This group of scientists has a clinic in Kyiv, Ukraine, giving fetal stem cells, which is nearly 24 different organ-specific stem cells taken from the end of first trimester. So you're talking about heart cells, liver cells, brain cells, kidney cells, lung cells, you name it. I've had it myself 8 times. I've had it every year since 2016. It's an amazing anti-aging therapy, but I've seen it reverse Parkinson's. I've seen nonverbal autistic kids start talking. It's all in my latest documentary. It's all there. I follow people before, during, and after. So you talk about courage. But there's a reason I'm saying this. Not only am I giving the world an insight onto something that basically could theoretically collapse the chemical-based pharmaceutical industry outside of cancer. This will not help cancer. But secondly, you're also angering a whole other sect of the population because you're utilizing abortions, which absolutely 50% of the world hates, right? You're utilizing this biological waste. And then, but my point of bringing this up is I don't expect to make a difference with this in the sense that I expect governments to accept this therapy. What's so satisfying about this project is watching the tiny group of people that have seen it, and either they know someone or they themselves need this therapy, they go get it, and their life has been changed. Like that. So what I'm trying to say is I went from trying to change the government's to like getting smaller, get my expectations smaller, like just to help enough people on the ground here. Don't try to change the world. Like, here's something people find so hard to believe, and I'm going to say it. I don't say it often, but during the Brzezinski era of my life, one of the people that was in charge of Brzezinski's finance, who was going to help him raise the money for the final phase of FDA testing to get approved, he used old college buddies with a man named David Axelrod. David Axelrod was President Obama's chief of staff and his chief architect to get him elected. So this guy was old college buddies, and he showed Axelrod my movie on DVD. He gave it to him when he met him in some random lunch in DC before it was released. And of course, I was so young and naive thinking, oh my God, this is amazing. Like the White House is going to see my documentary like before the world does. Axelrod comes back to the guy and says, too big. This is too big. Can't touch this. Way too big. So it was such an eye opener to think, oh, wow, here's a cure for cancer, essentially. Not a magic bullet, but really. I mean, like, you've got something that could compete with chemotherapy and radiation. And if anybody's seen somebody go through it, what a horrible existence, right? Although it has got its level of cures, but it's not a fun therapy. Here's this non-toxic, gentle therapy that has a better track record than that you could always choose first before chemo and radiation. And the FDA has tried to squash it. Everything's there. The NCI, the National Cancer Institute, tried to steal its patents. I've got it all in there. I've got all the witnesses, everything. And then the White House goes, ooh, too big.
Too big.
I'm sorry, I have to laugh. It was just hysterical. But so, yeah. So I've changed over the years. Like, I went from young, I'm going to topple everything, to, okay, let's focus on what's important. Let's if I'm going to deal with medicine, why not focus on a therapy like this? And I've even had the therapy, like I said, 8 times. My father's type 2 diabetes was essentially reversed because of this therapy. And so focus on the human side of it, like people that have no hope with certain ailments whose lives have been changed because of this. And that's what the new documentary is. I really started working on, it's called Ukraine Fetal Stem Cell Pioneers, like, you know, in 2016, really, when I first got exposed to it. I did 2 movies about this, but I kind of did this new one. I worked, basically 8 years on it or whatever it was, because you need that much time, because you meet people. Let's say this child with muscular dystrophy. I met her when she was like 6. She's now a teenager, walking around, going to a normal high school, while every other child her age, if alive, is in a wheelchair and a feeding tube because of this ailment. And she's, she should be on the cover of Newsweek and Time magazine, or Nobel Prizes should be thrown around, because they just fix muscular dystrophy to some degree. Not cured, but they're allowing people with this ailment to live normal lives, while every other kid is in a wheelchair. Jerry Lewis raised $1 billion for this ailment, got nowhere. Yet these Ukrainians are basically, keeping it under control, and no one's heard about it. So that's my overall. I'll say one more sentence on this. My overall goal with every new project is: has anyone talked about this yet? Has there already been a movie yet? Because if there is, I'm not going to do it. Like, I want to do something that I find not only is important, but is a subject that has not yet been tapped. That's what I love. That's like always my prerequisite before I do something new. Yeah.
Something I'm admiring a lot of you, like through all this conversation we're having right now, is the spirit, right? I think you've put so much effort behind all these films, and the reaction has been too big. Right, and one can have his hopes down that like why is it getting shut off and it's not spreading to a larger audience, right? And it's being heard because I'm putting the stories up front for a reason, right? So, I mean, given the controversial nature of all your topics, how do you handle the feeling of what? I mean, I will phrase this differently, like. Given the controversial nature of all your topics, you at the end, you want to pass on a message, right? And you want something out of it. What is that something when you put the stories up front? You expect the audience to react. What is there that all that work poured into? It should not just be for mere entertainment, but actually transform into an impactful movement.
I can answer that question really easily, and I'm not ever suggesting anyone that sees my movies will ever understand what I'm about to say. And what I mean by that is they're not going to see my movie and go, oh, Eric, this is his attitude. But here's my attitude in general. Since I was a kid, I've always been fascinated by innovative technology that changed everything, and how every single one of these was met with fierce resistance. It's like the old, what is it? Is either Gandhi or Kay said, first they hate you, then they get mad at you, then they blah, 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 and then they, join you. Whatever that phrase is, I destroyed that phrase. But what I'm saying is, like, if you think about something like the horse and carriage days, people were trying to figure out where to connect the horse to the car when it was invented. Like, it was so confusing. People thought electricity was like voodoo magic because somebody got killed, and like you could just like the internet. If you go back and look at internet, like the early days of the media going, what's this email thing? Who's going to use that nonsense? Like it just, every new technology has always had this. So, but if you invent a new technology in the field of medicine, and you'd like to believe that it would be such a game changer. Like if you go back to the polio vaccine, that was a different time in society where the inventor, if I'm not mistaken, it was easy to get that on the market. The first antibiotic was easy to get on the market and it was found by accident. Most all these scientific discoveries are always this weird accidental thing that happens. But today, because the market is so rigid, and there's so many careers dependent on this system, that if you invent something that turns it on its head, I find it fascinating to watch them deal with that. And I try to be very pragmatic about it. I don't look at the establishment as like this evil capitalism, and I just look at it. I'll go, oh, here we go again. Let's see how they handle this. Like, look at AI right now. Look at how fast that's moving. It's going out of control, like this exponential rate, and everybody's scrambling to deal with it. That's so exciting to me in a way, because like, here we go. Here's another one, and another good one. I don't want to get on the rabbit hole on this one, but like I've been following like Bitcoin for a decade, watching this thing unravel and just like go out of control. All we need is one more financial crisis, and then everybody's going to rush to that thing. And I'm going to be like, wow. And I can see it from a mile away, but most people can't. But anyway, I don't want to get on that. But to answer your question, like anything that has to do with a serious, innovative scientific discovery that can create a shift, I'm going to pay attention to it. And has anybody covered it yet? I'm going to look at it, whether it's medicine, whatever it is. But the Andorra Hustle, though, was interesting in that it involves so many moving parts, and it was such an outrageous story that, frankly, I don't think any other journalist was able to piece together. And I'm really proud of that, because it was such a fun exercise. Because I also, thank goodness I had the funding. Like, I didn't have to worry about money. Whenever I needed more money to, like, I got to go to Belgium now to interview Puigdemont. He's in exile. Okay, what do you need? I had everything I needed. Thank goodness. Like, I was very unusual. But it was so much exciting because I took a story that no one understood and I rabbled it together and I turned it into 90 minutes. And anyway, so yeah.
So how you compensate the job of a filmmaker with what actually required from you for that story of investigator? Like how you make your agenda, right? Like right now you're on a different agenda. You're not a filmmaker that is like trying, to like put the camera here, make it nice. Like you're on a journey of like, as you said, like you play cameras and like almost like spying and like this guys to bring the message out, like cutting clean. So how like, like Sherlock Holmes of our new days,
right.
Like.
Well, every time I learned early on that when you think you know what a documentary or a story will be, when it comes to nonfiction, like what I do, it's never remotely what you think it's going to be in the end. Like it always takes a new direction that you never saw coming, whether it be some new event happened in the middle of it, or if the narrative that you thought was true, when you dig deep enough, you go, oh my God, this is nonsense. That's not true at all. It actually is this. And that is the case with most all of my movies, honestly. So anybody that wants to try to do this and they think they know what this story is going to be, it's never what you think it's going to be. And that's kind of the exciting part of it. And it goes far. Like with the Andorra Hustle, the person who funded that, he thought he knew what this story was. And he thought it was a corrupt bank that stole his money. No, this was the Spanish secret police working with the U.S. Treasury to destroy an innocent bank under the idea that it was corrupt. Like it was totally insane. And all they were trying to do is destroy the Catalonian leadership's bank accounts. And so when I discovered this and I had to explain that these bankers were innocent, this whole thing is not what you think it is. It created a huge argument with the guy funding the movie. Like, there's a lot of drama behind the scenes when you make these things because people funding you think they know what it is, and because they're not on the ground, I am, and I see what it is, and then the narrative changes, and of course you have to follow what's real. You can't just change the narrative because the guy funding it wants it to be one way. And that's another benefit of being an independent filmmaker is unlike mainstream media where your boss says, no, you can't say that. You have to say this. I don't care if it's true or not. This is what you're supposed to say. Like, I don't do that because I don't have nobody to answer to, I don't know. I hope that answered somewhat.
As you said, Eric, a lot of drama. So basically, this like our series is called Masterminds in Media, and for sure you earn like the top title, like because like it's not just filmmaking. And I think, Eric, like there is something really special and unique about you that like maybe, and that's what I wanted to ask you next, like how you find the stories, or the stories find you, how exactly, because you said if somebody has worked on it, I'm not going to touch it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, like how does he get to you, right? And how you actually think it's actually even worth pursuing, because sometimes, like, you know, you can end up like in a rabbit hole of an investigation that it gets right because like you want it to be right. And how you know like what I'm saying here is the truth, and let it keep up front, right? I'm not being played by these people, right? In this case, as you said, I've been the one patient, like I know exactly, like put myself through it, like in the other. So how you do it?
It's a combination of many things. So like obviously the first one was my idea, and the second one was a sequel to the first one. I don't want to get in the weeds on it, but because the first one was so successful and it had to do with cancer therapy, I thought it was silly not to do a sequel where I would follow patients in real time. That was the point of the second one. And the third one was the one I wanted to make to begin with. So now that I had the clout and the recognition, the guy finally like allowed me into his world. And then after that, I didn't know what my next one was. But because I was running out of money at the end of my third one, and because I had a group of people that believed in what I was doing, one of the people who helped me finish that movie financially said, I'll help you, but I really want you to investigate fetal stem cells next. Like, I just think you're worth looking at. He's like, if you find something interesting in that, I'll point you in the right direction, then I'll help fund that. And so, and I honestly had no idea what he was talking about, but I felt compelled to like at least look at it. And so that's how I got on the fetal stem cells world. And that started in 2014. It's a decade ago, which is hard to believe. So I did that movie called The God Cells, funded partially by him and other people brought in. And then the Andorra Hustle came out of left field, as I mentioned. I got these emails saying, you want to do a story about banking? And I was like, what? So I juggled two movies, but I couldn't turn it down because I was interested, one. And secondly, like the funding was there. And like I made him understand, I have final cut on this. This is not your movie. This is my movie. I'll do the best I can. And then I did my last one, which was really a culmination of all that time from 2014 up until last year, called Ukraine Fetal Stem Cell Pioneers. So like, and honestly, you know what's funny? At this point in my career, I go, every time I get one of these done, I go, never again. I'm not doing any more ever again. Because there's so much drama.
I bet.
There's so much drama and there's so much to do.
Or at
like,
least you need like 3 months vacation in between, right? To disconnect and like gain back again the energy.
Yeah.
Impressive.
Like,
I mean,
well, but to go to your question though, so my inbox gets filled with people asking me, you should do a documentary about this, you should do a documentary about that. And usually it's just some random person just throwing ideas at you. But every once in a while, there's somebody very serious. And I have turned down a lot. Like, I mean, just because somebody's going to fund me, it doesn't mean I'm going to want to do it. You know what I mean? And I've even had people say, oh, pay me stupid amounts of money to do a project that I don't care about. I'm not doing that. You know, I'm not. And a lot of times it's to promote somebody, which also gets really annoying. Because once you become somebody with a kind of a name like myself, you get people wanting to hire you to do all kinds of things. And I've turned all of them down, except for like the Andorra Hustle, for example, which that wasn't promoting anything. That was just a crazy story. I mean, in the world of medicine, honestly, so much has changed and the censorship is so deep. I've found myself really wanting to just focus on this fetal stem cell technology at the moment. I did get offered to do potentially something having to do with what happened during COVID in ICU, with what the nurses saw behind the scenes. So the nurses and the people running the ventilators, and it's such a crazy story, and it's even more insane than anything I've ever done in many ways. And I'm honestly trying to decide if I even want to deal with that, because even though it's a really, really, really important story, I think about the backlash I'm going to have to deal with, because anything related to that subject. So so to answer your question, I don't know what my next one's going to be.
I mean, right now, like, you know, like I'm gonna like do for like anybody like who's OCD in the audience, like like maybe you can tell us a little bit more, and don't leave us like with like what exactly happened to COVID that you think like you should go deeper and investigate. Like what exactly?
That's the thing. I'm not suggesting. And by the way, I intentionally stayed out of that. Like everybody was like COVID this, COVID that. I'm like, I'm not touching that. I have been living in this world of being roundly attacked and censored and all of that long enough, and I knew enough to know not to go near it for any reason. But I'm not suggesting that I believe or don't believe, but there's a really compelling group of witnesses a book that was handed to me. I don't want to say the name of it yet or anything, because but the point is, there's a compelling group of witnesses, and I did enough research on it where these people were on Facebook Live at the time. There's enough social media trail to prove that all of what they're saying is true. Instead of just a bunch of angry people that just want to be mad at the system. Like, these people's lives were destroyed for trying to do the right thing during COVID. A lot of things were mishandled because of the chaos of it all. That's all. I don't want to get too deep on this because
yeah,
so,
I think like
yeah.
one of the things, Eric, is like, like anything in media is like these stories will come up like 20 years after, right? Like what will happen behind the scenes, and let's say it because right now it's safe and you won't create much. But like as you said, like in the present, like it seems like a lot of things move really fast, and people right now have all the means to bring those voices up, and like the industry's freaking out, right? Like social media is there, like it's one click away for me to, post the video and all that. But yet like people like reach you out and saying like, Eric, you made yourself like the filmmaker pro investigator, like the man for the subject, because you have the technique, the guts, and here is like supporting like, but at the end you're getting censored, right? Like you suffer all those things. How do you navigate these emotions, right? Like as you said, like it's a tough, because you defending that subject, I was thinking right now, like when you were doing the Andorra investigation, it's not like you were pro or a con, like you were just trying to give a subject up front without being, opinionated on it. Maybe in the end after, like, right, you get your own opinions. I'm trying to mix a lot because, like, of course, this is a fascinating story, everything you're saying here. And like, it's one of this conversation that doesn't come up to light many times. So, of course, like the stories, like with everything you've done so far, is what exactly is that? I mean, many questions. Right now, I'm like too excited, Eric. But the thing is, what is that? Like one of these dramas that like you kind of came across and you were like afraid and said like, okay, I didn't sign up for this. What's going on? Like, and you felt like your life was a little bit of edge and out of control because something.
It really was during my second and third movie. It was really everything shortly after the first one, because the first one was so popular and it was on so many outlets and it was getting so much attention. When you have celebrities tweeting about it and I even had Hollywood fighting over this story, which I didn't really ever tell this on a public forum. I had multiple big name celebrities fighting over this story to make a Hollywood movie about it. Like, anyway, the point is, I had like my email hacked. I would get crank calls. I'd be on the road and people would find what hotel I was at and like start making weird calls in the middle of the night, like all this sorts of weird stuff. You get attacked on social media. People make up lies about you. I don't know. You just, at first, when it first happens, it's very shocking and it's very jarring, but you just kind of have to take a deep breath and realize what's happening. And it's also, in a way, very fascinating. You go, wow, I think I'm actually doing something because they were this mad at me. They're going to this crazy effort to shut me up. Clearly, I'm onto something, right? And otherwise, they would just leave me alone. But over the years, it's two ways to answer this. One is you get thicker skin, and number two is I honestly, I'm got to a point in my life where I don't necessarily seek that lifestyle anymore, to be perfectly frank. Like, I don't really, I mean, if something's really important, and I will stand by it and I'll take whatever comes at me, but you also have to make precautions. Like, I have a very expensive encrypted email account now. I have multiple cell phones without SIM cards, so I don't do SIM card swap scams. I've had that happen to me too. Like, you just have to protect yourself and like realize there is somebody waiting to like mess with you, and you just have to be ready for that and just do whatever you can to protect yourself. But here's something else I've never talked about. I'll say it here publicly with you. I've never talked about this because I wanted to blindside everybody with this, but it came and went. I and a friend who's an Emmy nominated writer for some of the biggest television, including like Ozark on Netflix, right? Like big, and a director of television who started out as a director of photography on The Sopranos, went on to direct Dexter, House of Cards, Game of Thrones, Ozark, you name it, he's directed it. We had developed a series based on my documentaries. It was basically like the House of Cards, like that. Remember that show?
Yeah.
But like the FDA and pharma and lobbying and all of that. And we created this fictional show that we sold, and we got paid really well to write the pilot and everything. But no network would have the courage to take it on. We sold it privately to a production company. But that, I really genuinely thought that this was going to be my career move. Like, I would, because we have 15 platforms to choose from. We have Apple TV and Netflix and HBO and Showtime. We all these networks, and this, to my humble opinion, was one of the most incredible dramas, like I think on television of our generation. If you ask me, I'm sorry, I know I'm the co-creator and writer, but mind blower. We were so proud of it, especially anyway. But I really, and of course, it just fizzled away, and like, everybody in the industry, anyway. So now I'm back doing this again, So, yeah.
Yeah. So I think like right now, like there's a lot of content that doesn't have a home, and I wanted to switch this, discussions that we're having right now about tech, right? Like what are platforms out there like you think that will give a home for this? Like actually, in a lot of ways, we're seeing not this from the perspective of censored content, but we're seeing it from like, well, this is like this amazing movie that was made from independent filmmakers that made a bunch of impact in an audience, but like it's not interested because it doesn't play with that recipe that Netflix thinks, because it's not about a wood chopper, that like falls in love with a winemaker and like, right? It's like there's like a recipe for like people to be entertained and numbed. But I think like anything that perhaps is too much or like it falls apart. And yet there needs to be a home. And my interest was like, what do you think the future will look like for media? Because like there's a lot of, I would say, like unquality content out there that like gets streamed, promoted, announced, advertised. And yet the real thing it's like staying behind the doors. Like how do you think that there's gonna be a switch, or like, because people ask for it, right? Like people is like, give me something with quality. Or I think like I believe like in time like they will. But from like everything, like we've interviewed people, right? Like audiences, like if they're happy with like, and they're like, well, I get much of the same. Like they're all, like, I don't think like whoever decides to put me that, they don't think I'm smart. They think like I just like, So what's your take? Where do you think, because you lived the early internet, right? Like they embraced your content, and right now we're going in a direction there's like you're getting censored, and like and the work is getting only better. So what's gonna be?
Okay, well, gosh, well, first of all, we live in such interesting times. There's so many different ways to answer this question. There's so many categories of answers to answer. Like one is like, where do you think we're going to go next? I go from a technological point of view, both streaming and production. Like when I first started out, like being a professional film editor, which I knew how to do, and being like an animator and motion graphics guy that could make graphics fly across the screen and do all these complicated things. Now anybody can do that with AI on their telephone. Like it's so easy. Like I was paid really good money to make text fly around on a screen for a television commercial. Now you can do the same quality work on a phone. Like really, I'm no joke. Like any 16-year-old could do what I used to do. So the quality of the production is going through the roof. If you just anybody looked around, like what kids can do nowadays with all this technology. But what comes with that is there's such an oversaturation. I don't want to say over, but there's a saturation of media. Like it's everywhere and from all sides. And what's also frustrating, I think, for the viewer is you don't know what to believe anymore, especially with AI and deep fakes and everything. It's like, oh my God, like it's what a crazy world. But when it comes to like, if you really have a good story, if you're asking me like distribution, is that what you're kind of getting at? What is,
Well,
because it's a really broad question you ask me.
well, I think like it's not just distribution. It's like, what's the future? What do you think is the future for that content that currently doesn't have a home because it gets censored? But like, there's a whole ton of audience that can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, it's a variety of things. Like there are like entities that independent like distribution platforms that have done pretty well. Like for example, there's one called Tubi, Tubi, and they still have, if I'm not mistaken, most of my movies. Even though they're smaller, most people don't subscribe to them, but they're linked through Apple TV, at least in the US. So I can sit on my couch and like search for my movie name or my name, and my movies pop up on Tubi through Apple TV, which I thought was
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, Apple does like
Yeah.
syndicates a lot of the content, which makes it easier for people to
Yeah.
search. That's true.
Honestly, it all comes, frankly, with a good content. To be honest, like if you don't have anything anybody wants to watch, like it's no matter what kind of platform you're on. And it also has so much to do with timing. And I know I'm bouncing all over the place here, but like let's take for example, I told you in January of 2023, my movie Brzezinski exploded with 5 million views in less than a month. This is a movie that had been out for over a decade already. Okay. And it had been on multiple YouTube channels already. Why on this one channel did it explode like that? And so that's just a bizarre thing I can't answer, but it all has to do with this weird timing and momentum, right place, right time. There's a little bit of luck with that you can't really plan for. But But also, like, I honestly, YouTube is one of the most amazing platforms, frankly, out there. I mean, it's so accessible. That said, if you go to YouTube now or when you're done and put my name in the YouTube search box, you will find nothing that I've done. I'm shadow banned completely. You'll see all these old animations I did from like 15 years ago, like for Campbell's Soup and all these things I did when I was on Madison Avenue. And you'll see some of my paintings. But go
How is
ahead.
that day? Like, how is that day actually happening? Like, it's like one day YouTube tells you like that's it, or do you get like
No, well,
warnings like,
every
hey,
once in a
don't?
while, no, no, you get no warning. No, no, no. I'll just like every once in a blue moon, I'll just sit down. Maybe I'm drinking my coffee. I'll go, let's just Google myself. Let's see what happens, you know? And like, if you go to Google, it's pretty clean. Like it's a very clean front page of Google. It has my website. It has what my IMDb, my LinkedIn, like really clean. There was a time when my opposition would clutter the front page because they have the resources and the SEO knowledge to just destroy your front page of Google. But if you go to YouTube and put my name in, you're not going to find any of the important work at all. You'd have to know what you're looking for. So you'd have to literally, like in the case of fetal stem cells, you have to like type it out, like fetal stem cells documentary, and it may or may not even come up. So yeah, I mean, so there's, yeah, yeah. Like, for example, my latest movie, Fetal Stem Cells Pioneers, I released it over a year ago on YouTube. Haven't even broken 2,000 views. Like it's that like little known. Like it's amazing. Yet I still get 5 or 10 people a day that email me that say they saw it. And that's all that matters to me, really. And like maybe one of them that has an issue that could be fixed by this goes. And by the way, I'm going to go in August with my wife and for her therapy, and her family lives in Poland as well. I'm going to go to Ukraine. It's my fourth time during the war. I'm going to do a little bit more filming because in the days of social media, what's so great is short form content. So I'm going to do a little bit more filming. My wife can benefit from the therapy as well. I just had it last December with my dad. And so that's something else too that goes on to your question is what a lot of people are very bad at, not everyone, but a lot of people are bad at the promotion side. And if you really want to work this, you have to be active on social media. Like, so I've had to learn how to, make vertical video that fits on your phone dimensions for Instagram, in under 60
Yeah,
seconds, you know what I mean? And
adapt
like
and
just
survive.
keep thinking, yeah, adapt and survive. Yeah. When frankly, back in the day, when people started watching movies on their phones, we all just were like, what are you, crazy? What a stupid idea. That's what now everybody's watching movies on their phones. I do it on airplanes. I mean, it's just, you have to adapt. Yeah.
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 So, like,
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, you have done, like, now I have to imagine yourself, like, being the one on the other side of the industry and having been impressed by a movie or a documentary. Can you mention some that, like, really impacted you and said, like, whoa, okay.
Yeah. Gosh, it's been a little while. It's funny. Let me think. Obviously, this is old. I know this is really old, but like, any documentary where the documentary filmmaker is like in the middle of the subject, I've always wanted to do one of those. Like, for example, the Edward Snowden documentary, where they're like the journalist was like in the hotel room with him, they're dealing with all this around them, while he's doing his thing. Gosh, it's been a while. It was funny. Like people in the entertainment industry that write fiction love watching documentaries. People like me that like documentaries love watching fiction. It's funny.
Totally.
It's funny. So I don't gravitate towards them, but I watched kind of an interesting
I'm not
documentary
asking
called. Yeah.
documentary, but like
Oh,
anything,
oh.
anything that has like had an impact on you, right?
I mean, lots of things have had an impact. I mean, gosh, it's such a. I mean, Um, I just like really like some of the new drama series are incredible. Like, okay, this isn't really relevant at all. My latest one I'm watching right now is called Dark Matter on Apple TV. I think it was one
I
of the
see.
most
Yeah.
creative, yeah, one of the most creative, premises that isn't an already exhausted, subject matter or whatever. I don't know. I respond to really good writing and originality that stays away from cliches. That is risky and takes a chance. Anything that does that, like this is so cliche at this point, but like when Pulp Fiction came out ages ago, I was in college.
Yeah.
Like we were all like, I can't believe what this guy just, now, he just started a whole generation of filmmakers. And now Tarantino is not that interesting anymore. Oops,
Yeah.
so,
I've
but
been I've been
yeah.
consuming a lot of content from Adam Curtis. Like you remind me of his like approach of like articulating some of like
Oh
these
yeah,
dramas.
the guy
So
from the
I,
BBC, right?
yeah. So
Oh,
he's done
that guy's
like
fantastic.
the
Oh
center of the
yeah.
self, and he recently launched
Oh,
something on Russia.
I
Like
watched.
I like his style and all that,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Like
I watched all that
like
stuff. Century of Self has had a big influence on me. Which one was the one about advertising? Was it that one? He did two
Yeah,
big ones.
that one.
Okay,
And then like
yeah.
he did like hypernormalization, and recently he launched another one on Russia and like how the oligarchs came to be from like the transition from the Soviet Union right to the
Oh, I've got to see that. I've got to see
yeah,
that.
you
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
really
'Cause I'm
got to see
obvious
that.
because of the Ukraine situation and me being so intimately close to Ukraine. I'm very much interested in that whole relationship and just Russia. The history of Russia is fascinating and quite dark, frankly. But another one on that note was I already lost what it was, and something that really impacted me. It'll come back to me. Adam, oh, something like Black Mirror. There's a good example. Even though it's fiction, like that is
Yeah.
some really interesting, creative, daring content. And I'm always amazed that people like the guy who did Black Mirror even gets it on television or Netflix at all. Like I'm just like, how did he even get somebody to agree to that? You know? So
I mean,
yeah.
Eric, like I was thinking, like all these all these documentaries and topics, controversial topics, like you've been behind, right? I mean, there must have been. You said it yourself. Like there was drama. Like, tell me, like, can you share with us any drama that like you're like this is fiction or is like for real? Like
Like, oh, you mean like,
that happened to you,
t-
right? Like you had to deal
oh,
with it, and
I got a bunch
behind
of them.
the behind the scenes that you're like this is crazy. Like, come on.
Okay, here's one. Here, this is great. All right, if you're people that are familiar with my fetal stem cell work following this, when Russia invaded, this is great. I'm glad I've never told this publicly. So, when Russia invaded, I wanted to try to sort of save this technology, even though I'm just Eric. I mean, who am I? I don't have the power to do this because if something happens to Ukraine and the government falls, this technology could be theoretically gone. And so I was like doing two things. I was thinking, wouldn't it be interesting to investigate a new jurisdiction, right? That would allow them to set up a clinic there, which would mean like new laws, everything. And secondly, what an incredible documentary. Amazing. Imagine telling the story of like helping the Ukrainian scientists set up in a new location and the whole thing. So there's a country in the Caribbean called Antigua and Barbuda, and they had inadvertently legalized fetal stem cell therapy a few years ago. And this all happened in 2022 in this story. That was shortly after the war. And so I looked at the law and I was like, there's no fetal stem cell clinics there. In fact, there's no fetal stem cell clinics on earth outside of Kyiv, Ukraine. But a lot of these people that write these laws are so naive, especially with stem cells, because they don't even understand what stem cells are. So they just they went ahead and legalized fetal, which means cells taken from a voluntary abortion, right? So I even called the prime minister. Okay. I spoke to the chief of staff of the country. I said, can you please verify that I'm reading this law right? He's like, yeah, absolutely. He talked to the attorney general, got back to me. He said, yeah. We're not going to discriminate against any stem cell type, blah, blah, blah. And so me and my wife went to Antigua because it's a beautiful country in the Caribbean, and we started poking around. And we met with the Ministry of Health. We tried to find out how we could get the Ukrainian doctors over there, get them licensed there. We started talking about how we can get the cells, like the product, in through customs. And I even looked at a clinic space, which was an old Avita hair salon that was closed down, that somebody, I guess, went out of business. I don't know. But it was a perfect for like a starter clinic because it was clean. It had separate rooms. It doesn't need to be like a laboratory environment because you would just import the product, right? And give it to patients under a sterile medical setting. In the middle of this, I get a phone call on WhatsApp from the Prime Minister's chief of staff saying, the Prime Minister wants a meeting with you.
Oh,
The Prime Minister of the country wants to meet with me. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, wow. I'm thinking like so naively, this is exciting. Like, wow, the leader of the country wants to meet with me about this, why I'm there. So we go in, we wait way too long in his office. He sends us, the assistant sends us in, and the Prime Minister of the country chastises me for even thinking about helping the Ukrainians move and set up a clinic there. And I said, you've legalized this. Like your law states it's legal in your country. You have gone record on publicly and said on the news, Mr. Prime Minister, that you want to make your country the stem cells capital of the world. What could be a better way than using fetal? It's the most powerful stem cell therapy in history. He goes, no, it's not going to happen here. I don't care what the law says. My opposition will use it against me and I'll get voted out of office. And I was like, you were talking about bringing in untold millions of dollars in revenue under your corporate tax structure. I looked into all of this. I wasn't prepared for this, but I looked into all of it. I said, you will have a global monopoly on this technology. People from all over the world will be coming here. Not to mention, you're only an hour away flying from the United States. You would be overrun with patients here because you would have a global monopoly. He says to me, I don't care how much money you can bring into my country. It's not going to be worth anything if we can't enjoy it, he says to me. So like this is just one hilarious example that I've never shared before of like my job, and I wasn't even really working on a movie yet. This was just in the research phases of just traveling to a new country with this technology under my wing, if you would. Even though I'm not a part of this company, I'm just a big believer in what they're doing, and I'm a patient. I mean, I've had it 8 times. From an anti-aging longevity point of view, I've never found anything in my life that has been this beneficial for my health and like keeping me going at full steam ahead and like thinking. I don't know. I just really like the therapy. Anyway, that's one crazy story of drama because it was really depressing if you think about it. Because we really thought that multiple things would happen. Like that was the way, right? And so, but it also inspired me. I'm trying to think of some other stuff. A lot of stuff I couldn't ever mention to you publicly. There was some crazy stuff that has happened. That
Yeah, I was thinking
couldn't,
like
but,
since we have
yeah.
Andorra next, like I was kind of like trying to picture you right among the mountains, right, like dealing with all this stuff that was going on.
Well, like in Andorra, okay. When I was in multiple, you ever been to Andorra? You
Yeah,
ever
I
been?
lived there. I actually lived
Oh,
there.
oh,
Yes.
well, okay, okay. So what's the gosh, it's been so long. I used to stay at the Plaza mainly, right? It's called the
Right in
Plaza,
the
right?
center. Yeah,
But
yeah,
then
like
there's,
it's the
but yeah,
center.
yeah. But I'd like to bounce around to different hotels because I wanted different environments for the people I was interviewing. Because they would usually, because they didn't feel safe me coming to their house, understandably, so they would come to me. And there's one hotel that's really big. I honestly can't remember the name of it. It's huge. It's like kind of up in a more natural area. It's not in the middle of
It's like
everything. The
Hermitage, like
point.
has like the going down and like there are many big, but like
I
I'm trying to
know.
think.
Well, let me just get to the point. The management of the hotel found out why I was there. I don't know how they found out. They found out that I was working on this documentary, and maybe because they saw the people coming in, and I came this close to like having who knows what would have happened to me, but I felt the pressure heat up, and we got out of there. Like because we didn't know. Because in Andorra, you can get arrested for any reason and be held for 2 years
Yes.
without charges. Like, and I could have been arrested for all I knew. I mean, but I just saw the writing on the wall and just got out of there, at the time. And from that day forward, I just stayed in the safe hotels because one of the hotels was that the Plaza, for example, was the family friends of like the owners of the bank that got destroyed or something. So I was going to be protected there. But yeah, it's like, yeah, I'm sure there's more stories. Like
I
they kind
mean,
of,
yeah.
yeah, there's so many of them that you just become kind of numb to them. I mean, obviously the David Axelrod story, that was a big one. That was a really big one. I mean, um, I don't know.
You
I
know,
mean,
Eric, I was
yeah,
like thinking, like like right now I was like full on adrenaline as you were talking because my God, what a waterfall of storytelling and having you as like the upfront in all these amazing stories that like yet everybody might after this podcast might be like, where can I find Eric, like and we'll make sure like we can point
yeah.
them like to right direction. So if you have like there must be like filmmakers out there they're pursuing a career like yours, trying to bring messages. Like if you can talk to the young Eric at the beginning, right? Like back in 2011, with all these dramas that you have been like, and everything like you have been through, right? Like, what will be those advices that you're like, okay, those are the lessons that I learned, and like, I mean, if you're pursuing this, like, what will be those?
The biggest thing I would say is that I'm so proud of myself for not doing. I've not. Don't make it a political issue. Like for example, the Brzezinski movie. The in America, my biggest fans were right wing Republicans or libertarians, even though that's not necessarily who I am. And then, of course, fast forward, I do fetal stem cells. I infuriated all of those people that loved my work before the right wing Republican, libertarians that hate abortion. But so, like, I never allowed any of my movies to become a left or right issue. I think it's so easy for people to do that. And the thing is, the reason it's so easy for people to do that is because it's easier to get an audience if you're clearly leaning left or clearly leaning right. You're not doing anybody any favors if you try to make something political because you're just creating more of a division amongst us. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? You're following me in this? So like
Yeah.
whatever that is, so like with fetal stem cells, it's clearly the left wing are going to be more supportive, but I don't make it that at all. Like I never touch that subject. Secondly, other advice I would say is, I mean, I mean, as a documentary filmmaker, it's really, unless you've got something that could be commercially viable, like if you look at these Netflix documentary series that are out there, like to be perfectly honest, I personally get annoyed. Like I think about some of these documentary series that are out there, that these like 5 hour long things about like one murder. I'm thinking about all the time and resources put into this stupid story. I'm sorry, I don't mean to like poo poo on it, but like think
No,
about how many more important stories are out there. And you're going to talk about this one murder, about this one thing that go on for 5 hours. Like I just find it such a waste of time. But if one of those things interests you, you could probably get corporate funding to do something like that. But my kind of stuff, you're never going to get corporate funding ever. You're going to get private funding, which is wonderful because there's enough wealthy private people, and making these films are not that expensive as long as you can get your rent paid. But as long as making these films, you just have to understand that you're not going to get rich doing it. You're not. It's just not. Unless I had like the Hollywood windfall that came this close to happening, but twice, by the way. You just have to do it for the love of it. I mean, and really believe in what you're doing and don't compromise for any reason. And again, try not to be political at all. But I can tell you, like, for example, this book situation, I contacted the author because the person who wants to fund it said, I want you to base the documentary kind of about this book. So I contacted the author, and the author immediately thought that Hollywood just called and he's going to make $1 million off optioning his book. I'm like, dude, no, this is a documentary that no one's going to make any money on at all. You know, it's like, it's really interesting. So even people that are in the world don't understand, like writers don't understand this world. I don't know. I'm getting on a tangent again, but like when it comes to documentary films, honestly, if you're going to take on something really big, if you would, like which I consider mine to be, you're going to have to find the funding for it. You're going to have to find somebody, either you are already independently wealthy and you're willing to lose it for the cause and get the message out.
yeah,
And there's plenty of people that do that in many other ways. I mean, there's a lot of people that have used their money in a philanthropic way, not expecting to make a dime off of it. And that's wonderful if there's people out there that have that. But I got to tell you, I mean, it's not a lucrative career. No, making documentaries. But if you want it out there, I mean, like
I
YouTube and yeah. Sorry.
I think it should be, Eric. I think like people, it will come at the time that like the internet, like we got used to, like, you know, we subscribe, we everything is for free. But like when it comes to quality, I think like you should pay the one that needs to get paid. And that's where like I think like right now, I have this psychology that every time I'm faced with a paywall for watching something on Prime TV, like documentary or something, I appreciate it even more because it has not been like put through out there for me to watch it for free. And it's like a psychological trait. I think maybe like it's a little bit in there. But I have a big hope that the audience will like start changing and, you know, demanding. So there is going to be a little, like, it's going to like relax the situation that we're currently like faced, that like everything, like, you know, is the easiest thing to shut a voice down, like it happened to you, right, with YouTube in this situation. And I like, we need to be, first of all, extremely grateful that like you are the way you are and you brought up the stories, and because what would have been without you, right? So I think like living that legacy is more than any single, like, you know, other money that like could be paid. And many people will love to have like that tag on their back, like I've done it and like I spoke about it, and it's up to you to believe it or not, to leave it or not, but it's out there. And I think like in time you would see, Eric, that like maybe like very soon somebody was gonna do, and I think it must be a movie on you and everything, right? Like you've been through it, to like put that story out, because like I think like fiction gets short in that. Maybe that's why you enjoy fiction so much. And
Yeah.
and to that point, Eric, I think what we've been discussing here, like we owe you for like the bravery, like you said, like you get tired and like I'm not gonna do it, right? Like this COVID, like I'm not gonna do it. Like, and I think like we need to learn, because today like we want to be pleasing and we want to like I think like those are like the behaviors of like, hey, let's be quiet and like say the right thing, but you never know what the right thing is and how much we give up to what is out there. So I would ask you, like, hey, like if things calm down, right, and there's a little more flexibility to go, and like, you know, what would be other subjects you'd be very interested to bring up to life, right? Like forget about like the emotions behind, because you've been through so much, right? And like many people might want to like, you know, put you down, but like we spoke about, like, you know, medical, like, you know, subjects, financial subjects. Is there anything else out there that you say like, hey, like maybe I'll like, you know, go to Mars, like be on the moon, like first, like get crazy, Eric, get crazy.
Sure. th- this is kind of really boring, and it's but I'm fascinated by the monetary system. I'm really fascinated. I don't think anybody's done it justice to really explain what the heck it is. I mean, I know it sounds like, and that's one of the reasons I haven't done it, because it seems so sterile and boring. But like, where on earth does money come from? Like, literally, these governments are printing this out of thin air, and I'm not a fan of the gold standard, any of that
Yeah,
either.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I could care less about being backed by gold or any of this nonsense. Of like what gives money value? It's just pieces of paper. Like, you can't stick it in a gas tank, you can't eat it. Like, you know what I mean? And like, why? And this all this nonsense about the debt, the national debt. Like, if a government can print its own money anyway, can it get itself out of debt? Why are we paying taxes if the government can print its own money? I just find it such a fascinating scenario, which of course brings me to this new era of this whole Bitcoin sort of thing we're living in, where all these people are jumping ship and transferring their dollars into Bitcoin or their euros or whatever, and just jumping ship. And they're like, they're keeping everything over there because they just see something going on over here that doesn't make any sense. And if you look at the 2008 banking crisis, if you look at what happened during COVID, where the markets collapsed and then the quantitative easing, as they call it, and the money was flying everywhere. Money was falling out of the sky from the government to me and my wife. It was absurd, like in the tens of thousands during COVID. Like, where did that come from and why? Do you know what I mean? I don't even work for a company. I'm like, I don't know. I just find it all fascinating. And it's one of those Sherlock Holmes moments where I'd like to hit the ground and poke around and just sort of like do an interesting story about the monetary system. And I know that sounds really boring, but I think it's really important in that, because there is sort of a new avenue. My people say, well, okay, so what if the monetary system is a disaster? What choice do you have? And we're living in a world, believe it or not, kind of like the horse and carriage into the automobiles, kind of like the airplane just got invented. It's kind of like fire and electricity. There's this new technology called Bitcoin. Most people think it's some weird tulip bubbled magic internet money. That's not what it is at all. It's a very interesting technology that most of the financial rails are going to be running on, whether we accept it or not. It's going to change the world. It gave the spawn of blockchain and all of this. But frankly, the only reason that honestly I haven't done it is because I think it would be outdated if I touched the cryptocurrency side. It would be outdated 3 weeks after I finish it because it moves so fast. I'm not kidding. So, like, to answer your question, like, I would love to poke around with the monetary system, but it doesn't mean I'm going to do that. But here's the thing too, like, whenever I do a movie, I never really know if I'm really gonna do it. Like, it always starts out slow. I'm always like, okay, let's see what's going on here. Let's see what's going on there. And then it hits an inflection point where I go, oh my God. And I get really excited. I go, okay, I'm doing it. You know, I've done a handful of movies I've never saw the light of day. I went to China. I went to Guangzhou and studied this other cancer therapy. Then I went and I was like, nah. And I just trashed it, you know? I can't even think. I mean, there's probably a handful of others that I've done. It's been a while, but I don't know. It's one of those things, but something would have to happen. And this is the only thing I can think of, honestly, but it still doesn't mean that I'm going to lose sleep over this. I'm going to do this. But the fetal stem cell thing is something I'm not going to put down. I'll tell you right now. I'm not going to say I'm going to do another movie about it, but if there's another movie, I haven't found it yet. That's best I can tell you. Nothing has really been banging on my door saying to Eric, to up here going, Eric, you got to do this. You got to do this. Not yet. I'm sure that day will come. You know, I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question.
Absolutely.
But,
You did answer. And like to your point, you said like, oh, monetary system, like it's boring. I think like what we got so far is boring. Like people were like, well, you know, I haven't still got like the deal, because I answer myself, what exactly is that mechanism? And I think there was this book that I love. It's called like Thinking in Systems, and it gives you like this framework, and it's like a lot of people I spoke with is like, what an amazing book. And the lady died without finishing it. And I'm like, somebody, AI must resuscitate this woman so people can talk to her. What was exactly, you know, like that science fiction like image that you can picture in your mind. But truth to be told is, in your story about monetary system, like there was this documentary on Game Changer, right? Like when GameStop and all that. GameStop, like the whole situation, like a group of Reddit like turned down a whole market and like that. I think like there is a transition, like and the stories will come to you. What I'm most excited about, and like from our conversation, is that like you are there, and when the time will come, you will have the right skills, and like you have the right skills and everything in your hands to like put it out there, like for the truth to come out. So I'm really excited, Eric, for like, you know, like everything that will end up in your hands, and I hopefully like highly hope like you'll get excited easily and like not get too smashed down for everything that has happened, because the times are changing and the people are asking new things. And this is one of the things like fascinates me more about tech that I like, myself get involved into, is because it's about freeing people, right, and giving them tools and options and knowledge, and let it flow. And it's fascinating having talked to you that you've navigated like this the roller coaster where like something was truly embraced and then like shut down and like ended up being censored like that. That sounds like
Yeah.
the Benjamin Button of like professional career case. And
Right, right.
and I think Eric, like maybe you're not like told too often, but I speak on behalf of everybody. Like I exchanged some is we're big fans of your work, like and everything. So that's why like it's an honor, to get all these stories out, and you share some very very intense stories with us today. Eric, like I've taken a lot of time, and I wanted to wrap it up with like some I guess representing the audience here. And again, like you said, like some advice on their career, and that what do you think that like right now you would like to see in the world and it's not yet there, like it being like I would say like a solution or tech, or even like an attitude from people that you're not seeing, and it will make your work and life easier.
Oh gosh, I mean, the easiest answer to that is actually honor the concept of free speech, which is not being honored, not in America, certainly not in in Spain, and in many other places of the world. It's a kind of a bit of not true. If there was genuine free speech, like I wouldn't be censored by this stuff, I mean, there is a level of it. People can still write books and things like that, but what I would like to see change, interesting. I don't know. I mean, that would really be the pinnacle. Like, just stop getting in our way. Like, if a platform, like something as simple as YouTube, if you put a movie on YouTube and the audience responds and watches it 5 million times, even though I know that YouTube is a private company, it's not the government. But why not just let that be? Why not leave that alone? Why are people not allowed to watch it another 5 million times? Why do you have to hide it from your own audience? Like it's just I find it incredible. But I really, at the same time, I don't really have a lot of complaints. I'm kind of in a way, again, because of my I embrace innovative technology. I find this new era of AI and this whole new era of everything exciting. A lot of people get scared of it, and it's so easy to get mad at it and go, like so many people resisted the internet and resisted email and resisted everything, anyway, or resisted the cell phone even. And I'm like, ooh, what's the next thing going on? And if there is resistance, that makes me even more interested. So, I really don't have a lot of complaints. I mean, I try to look at everything glass half full kind of person. Yeah, I mean, I guess also the corporate world has become like a new dictatorial situation. I mean, I know it sounds like a cliche, corporate America, but it's everywhere. When companies that are run by private citizens control, in this case, the media, it's a very dangerous kind of scenario because there's no genuine free speech because they can hide behind it being a private company. You know what I mean? And so it gets in really dangerous waters in that way. I don't know. I have to give it more thought. I don't really have a lot to complain about, honestly, except that just the constant annoyance of playing whack-a-mole when one of my movies does well on a platform and then it gets taken down because it's doing so well. Like, what a weird thing to say. Like, what a weird life to live when it's hard enough to get people to pay attention to what you do. And then you do get paid attention to and they yank it. Like, what is that?
The irony, the irony.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, Eric, thank you so much. It's been incredible. I think like if it were up to me and like not to be disrespectful of your time, I would like continue this forever. So I hope you come and visit us in Barcelona and like we can continue this over like, over like a glass of wine or like like cup of tea, wherever it is. Like I would love to continue this conversation. I mean, thank you so much for the passion of sharing, and taking the time and like and keeping that spirit. I think it's very important, mostly now than ever.
Thank you. Honestly, I can't remember the last time I've done an interview like this where we just talked about what we're talked about. It's always usually about the subject matter specifically. So this is an absolute pleasure for me as well. It's very therapeutic for me to kind of tell these stories and and just talk about my last 15 years of my life. So thank you. It's enjoyable for me too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.